This week on the Real Housewives of Atlanta reunion.
Angela.
Of course not. I
Did you
just
want
met
to
her.
take Angela down?
Why would I want to? I don't even know her.
What it is Phaedra is wanting to secure her spot.
I don't have to secure my spot because, baby, I got a guaranteed contract.
Yo, what is up, everybody? Welcome back. We're going to be recapping the first part of the reunion for the Real Housewives of Atlanta. Let's get right into it. Alright, so I always love seeing the behind the scenes of when the women go into the reunion very early to get ready, get glam, get dressed. As far as looks, let me know who was y'all's favorite. I gotta say, I think Porsha slayed, Shamea, Angela. To be quite honest, I think they all did great. I'm not usually like a super like fashion person that like, oh, that's horrible. Like, it takes a lot for me to say something's bad. I honestly didn't think any of the outfits were that bad. I didn't like Drew's, but it wasn't anything like that I was like, oh, it's horrible. So I liked everyone, but y'all let me know who was y'all's favorite. Okay, so we see Phaedra go she's knocking Britt's dressing room door. She gets no answer, goes inside only to find an empty room. So Phaedra goes into Porsha's room and Cynthia's there as well. And Porsha calls her. She gets no answer. Where is Britt? They're all wondering. The crazy part is, I'm sure a lot of y'all have heard this by now, but Britt was actually going. Like, some of the women have said in other interviews that they've done that Britt got her nails done the night before. She had spoken to some of the ladies, had her gown ready and everything. So I really want to know, what was it in like a few hours that made you be like, I'm not going? That I really don't know. I still think that Britt should have manned up, womaned up, and attended, because Britt, you were making a lot of sense towards the end of the season. A lot of people were actually on your side when it came to some of these little arguments you were having with Kelli and with Shamea. So I think she should have gone, but she didn't. It's funny because the left side is just two people, Phaedra and Porsha, and then the other four are in the other one. So Andy acknowledges, once everyone is out there, that Porsha is back. She got a new set of breasts, which is funny because there was like sort of a little parallel to her season 6 reunion when she got a boob job. But anyway, he then goes around introducing each of the other women, welcoming them and asking how they're doing. Angela brought her a little fan. Kelli brought a crystal. Andy then addresses that Britt Eady decided not to join them. Kelli and Angela were surprised because I think the only ones that knew at that point were Porsha, Phaedra, and Cynthia. The other ones didn't, so this was news to them. But here goes Kelli saying that Britt caused mass destruction on this friend group. Okay, Kelli, really? Mass destruction? That's a bit much. And we're talking about friend group. You're barely in it. Like, what are you talking about? She says that Britt placed the victim and the villain at the same time. Phaedra says that at the end of the day, it is a sisterhood, and she's upset that Britt isn't there, that she didn't feel comfortable enough to come, speak her mind. Porsha says, well, I did speak to her yesterday, and she even told me that her husband was coming. Shamea says she was looking to hold Britt accountable. Drew says that she actually had the last time she spoke to Britt was a few weeks ago, where Britt actually had texted her saying that she would sue Drew over an interview that she did. I was like, oh wow, little did they know later that day, Britt was actually going to sue the network. That Phaedra says that her headpiece is inspired by the Jab Jab Festival in Grenada. The reunion set is actually Grenada themed. Andy then acknowledges that Shamea, Angela, and Kelli, this is their first season as housewives. And when he was doing all this stuff, asking about why you wearing this headpiece, Angela, it's your new season, Shamea, I was like, okay, you know what? We are 15 minutes in. We haven't even touched a single topic. This does not need to be 3 parts. Just give us 2 parts and we're good. Like, I don't want all this filler stuff. After the commercial break, they bring out Miss Cynthia Bailey, because at this point, why not? Well, like, why not bring her out? Love Cynthia. I love that. She looked very simple, yet beautiful at the same time. I mean, Cynthia Bailey, she can wear a potato sack and she's going to look amazing. When Cynthia comes out, Andy says she was a great friend. I like the way he described her. He described her as the best friend. And he asks how was her experience this season, being the glue of the group, and they talk about that. They also joke about some other stuff. So then we begin our actual first topic of the season, Porsha, her divorce, and the fallout with Drew this season over the Dennis drama. So we see a few scenes from the season. After seeing those scenes, Porsha did get a bit emotional over the loss of Blondie, because they did include that in the package as well. It's very sad. In regards to her filming that last scene in her house, she says that when she was married to Simon, they agreed to have a prenup, even though they considered maybe not getting one because she was so in love, but they did. He did buy the home prior to their marriage, but the prenup has certain stipulations that made it a marital home. She says that she wants to maintain it, whether she chooses to sell it down the road or whatever the case may be. She still wants it because it's probably the only thing she'll get from the divorce. Andy asks, well, where are you in the divorce? And Porsha says, oh, well, I'm kind of like the phantom divorce of hers. Like, she went in, it was supposed to end, but it didn't. When she said that, Drew whispers to Kelli, who was she talking about? Why'd she say her? Andy then says, I heard that Simon was detained by ICE. And Porsha says, that's true. He asks Phaedra why that is, which is pretty self-explanatory, but Phaedra says, well, he is detained because he has no citizenship. Which pretty much, and I am glad she said that being in a detention center is sort of being like in a jail. Andy says that people on Twitter think maybe Porsha called ICE on him. And I thought to myself, are people actually saying that? Because it's not funny. Like, with everything that's going on right now with ICE, like, I don't think it's even a laughing matter. And the ladies didn't think so either. Of course, Porsha said that's not true. Andy then asks Shamea if Gerald and Simon were buddies. Shamea says, yeah, they were cool. I did definitely talk to Porsha before the wedding about his past and some things that were being said. And Porsha says that's very true, and that's why it took 9 months to set up their prenup, because she wanted to be protected against all that. Andy then asks Kelli, why are you... there's a question that says, Kelli, were you curious to know if Porsha messed with that lady's husband, or were you asking because you were concerned? Or were you being messy? And Kelly's like, well, I was concerned. And that's when Porsha was like, that was not a concern. Yelling it at a party. Kelli says, I didn't yell it. I was just asking what happened. And Porsha's like, well, did you get your answer? Kelli says, well, you answered. You said that it was that you were in love with him, but it just doesn't seem real. So Porsha's like, wait a minute, you and I had a woman-to-woman conversation, and we discovered that we were actually going through similar situations, financial situations, and our husbands were at the time blasting us, putting things out there online. And then Kelly's like, whoa, I was married for 11 years. You were married for 11 months. Don't compare apples to peaches. Damn. And then Porsha's, oh, okay, so mine didn't count? And then Kelly says, just don't compare my divorce to yours. Porsha says, I'm not comparing. We were just two women fighting for their lives at the time. And Kelli says, well, I was fighting literally. I'm sorry, but Kelli was doing the most. She seemed to be getting mad over things that were not that serious. Like, it almost seemed like she wanted an issue with Porsha to fight about at this reunion. I don't know. Andy then reads a question about Porsha. People already think you stole a cast member's man. Why would you say that you would sleep with Charles? Porsha says, let me apologize again. I gotta say, when I talked to Angela at Cynthia's event about this, she also apologized because she had brought up the Simon situation. She was dragging it too. Angela says, well, you were the first one to bring up my husband first when you said, yeah, you had heard something about him. And when we were in Nashville, I did ask you, why did you take that woman's husband? And then Shamea said she introduced you to Simon. Shamea is quick, though, to say, no, I did not introduce Simon to Porsha. Drew says, well, I heard that too, Shamea. And Shamea's like, well, you hear a lot of stuff, but I'm telling you right now, I did not introduce them. Andy asks Porsha, did Shamea introduce you guys? Porsha then stays silent, and she's like, listen, no. That was weird. I don't know why Porsha made that pause, but they did run the tape back on what Angela said Shamea said in Nashville, and that it wasn't the case. What Angela says Shamea said wasn't said. Andy then brings up a question about Dennis and if maybe Porsha and him would have another baby together. A little bit more lighthearted question. And Porsha says that, they get along so well. That's why she was so protective of him. She really enjoys him. She says, we just be kikiing. And then Kelly's like, all in that man's house. And then Porsha's like, well, what are you talking about? In that man's house? Well, did you have your house? You had to sell yours, right? You should have had a better prenup. So they kind of go back and forth on that. Then they bring up a podcast that Drew did where she said that Porsha's return was a flop. She says that she still stands by that. Porsha says that she should be worried about who's flipping and flopping in the basement with Ralph. And Drew's like, Simon says you had no storyline. Okay, that was a good one by Drew. Porsha says, Dennis is my storyline. He's a part of my family, and you put yourself in the middle of that. Drew says that she was just working with him. She didn't mean to do anything bad. It was nothing, sinister there. Then they get into this message that Porsha apparently showed Ralph, where I guess it was insinuated that maybe Drew was trying to make advances with Dennis, whatever the case may be. So Drew says, yes, let's please see the message because Ralph actually told me what was really in it. Porsha's like, well, I don't have the text message. And then Drew's like, how convenient. But Porsha says that all she remembers is that Drew had said something, and then Dennis had responded to that text saying, I'm not going to blank you, I just want my money. Cynthia then jumps in there and she says to Drew that she shouldn't have put herself in this situation because even that situation in itself distracted from what they were even doing in the first place, the music. And Drew's like, Porsha knew me and Dennis were working together. Shamea then says, actually, she told me that she didn't know. So Drew's like, Shamea, go sit on Porsha's lap. I don't even know why you're interjecting. Shamea says, 1 second. What I'm saying is, when you came to my house, I asked you, were you dating Dennis? Y'all made it seem like I asked if you were effing Dennis. Angela says, well, no, the problem was that we had with you was that it kind of seemed like you were speaking for Porsha. Porsha now says, well, I didn't even want Shamea to ask anything. I actually even asked her not to. Shamea says, no, you didn't. No. So then they go back and forth a little bit on that. Andy asks Drew, well, why would you work with Dennis? Out of all the producers that there is. And Porsha says, well, the music is great. The album is amazing. I don't want to take that away from her like she did on The Breakfast Club talking about my hair company. But she does make great music. Andy then has a question asking Porsha if she owes Drew an apology since Drew and Dennis' relationship really was all business. Porsha then says nothing. She gets up and everyone's like, where is she going? But then she actually goes towards Drew. She grabs her hand and she hugs her. And she does say that she wants to apologize for a meeting with Ralph as well. She says that even though she felt justified, she didn't feel good about it. She says that she cared about Drew, so she does apologize because this could have all been a conversation. It didn't need to be blown out of proportion. Drew says that she appreciates it because when she started the show, her very first season, Porsha was the one who had her back. So they made up. Yay! Alright, moving along. Andy addresses Kelli. He says, Kelli, when we started this season, you and Britt were so close, almost finishing each other's sentences. What happened? Kelli says, well, Britt was feeling very down at the time with the whole Kenya thing. I tried to cheer her up. I had a team for a while, and even before I was on the show, so I told her to use my team so that she could feel good and whatever. I guess she thought that she could use it forever, even though I only wanted her to use it just for a little bit. And that's where the problem started. I know she's never been used to having a team, so maybe she was jealous. Andy did ask, and Kelli did clarify, though, that Britt definitely always paid for services. Porsha then says that she doesn't want to speak for Britt, because Andy had asked Porsha what she thought. She doesn't want to speak for Britt, but Britt did tell her that at the very beginning, the newbies, Kelli, Shamea, and Britt wanted to have an alliance. They actually went to a restaurant to talk about this. They wanted to take things to the next level, especially now that Phaedra was coming back. Their goal was to take Porsha down. So Shamea is like, let me be clear. Yes, there was an alliance. Me, Kelli, Britt, and Porsha. I was telling them not to come so hard on Porsha because Porsha was part of this alliance. But you guys, Porsha denies this, though. She says that she actually never would be in an alliance because she knows that alliances kill the show. So, yeah, Shamea, I don't know if I believe that, Shamea. I don't know if I believe that Porsha would be in an alliance with Kelli and Britt and you. I don't know about that. In regards to having Britt's back after the Kenya drama, Kelli says that she was having her back because she was a good friend. But she does regret, for example, backing some of the time she would back Britt up, like the time when Britt brought up Charles' secret baby and then Kelli jumped in on that. She says she apologizes for doing that. Angela's like, well, I didn't even know there was an allegiance. They're like, it's an alliance, not allegiance. They also briefly talk about Kelli's fight with Britt at Phaedra's event. Remember when the abortion and all that stuff was brought up? Kelli says, first of all, my body, my choice. And she also says that she actually never, confided this with Britt. Apparently the stylist who used to work for Kelli, who's now working for Britt, said it to Britt. She also claims that she didn't have any abortions during the marriage because she had already had her tubes tied. Kelli then says that her divorce is finalized. She's very happy. She spent $200,000 on the divorce. That's a lot of money. $200,000. Andy asks, what do the ladies think about Kelli going around with a bodyguard everywhere she goes? And Porsha says, well, we all know one of the reasons. One of the reasons being that her husband's after her. But there's another reason. Reason number 2 is that her husband is actually not coming for her and that she might be doing all of this for the show. What? Drew says that Kelli's ex-husband actually reached out to Ralph to say the same story to him. Kelli's like, well, let me address that. Let me make it clear that not everyone can file a restraining order. There needs to be cause. And then Porsha's like, is that true, Attorney Parks? And Phaedra says, cause can be anything. For example, if you take a restraining order in front of the judge and that person doesn't go to the hearing with the defense, the judge could grant the restraining order in the state of Georgia. Kelli also had a lawsuit that they addressed for $100,000 for unpaid expenses. She says that she's paid it at this point and her new restaurant will be opening soon. But I wonder, how do you... First of all, you spend some money on the divorce, $200,000. You then have $100,000 debt that you're being sued over, but you still seem to have, the money to spend on a whole team and to paint your dog pink and throw it a party. She says it's all worth it, but I don't know about all that. That feels like kind of reckless to me. Andy then asks Shamea if she might have, been stirring the pot a little bit when it came to Kelli and Britt's friendship. Shamea says no, and then Kelli says she will never be friends with Britt. She then talks bad about Britt. Drew's like, how does Britt make her money? And then Andy's like, oh, insurance. And then Angela's like, what type of insurance? I'm gonna be honest though, I don't like it a whole lot when people are talking about someone who's not there to defend themselves. I don't know. Kelli says, I did so much for her. I bought her and Mike and IV. She never showed up for me. Okay. I'm done with that. Alright, to finalize this first part, they move on to Angela's storyline this season. So they show lots of clips of her and Charles, some of their problems, the rumors, nastiness, and then the finale BS. After watching all of that, Andy asks Angela, how do you know it was Phaedra who sent this man? Angela says, well, he told me it was Phaedra. He is from Athens, Georgia, and his aunt is Kimberly Bleep. They bleep her last name. Phaedra says, I don't know, no Kimberly Bleep. Angela says, this is a pattern with you, Phaedra. Phaedra's like, a pattern of what? Angela turns to get a folder that she had tucked in the pillow before the reunion began, and she pulls out some pieces of paper with, I guess, screenshots or some information. One is of Marcus, this Kimberly Bleep aunt, and Kimberly is friends with Phaedra's brother. I guess she had a picture of the brother because Phaedra says, yeah, that's my brother. And Angela's like, yeah, you all went to the same high school together. There's only 2 high schools and 3 middle schools in Athens, Georgia. Andy's like, okay, they all went to the same high school together, but what does that have to do with how he came here to say what he said? Angela says, well, he first tried to actually pin it on Kelli. Andy's like, well, if he tried to pin it on other people, then why would you believe that he's telling the truth when he said it was Phaedra? Angela's like, well, they all went to the same high school, Andy. Andy then asks Phaedra, do you have something against Angela? And Phaedra's like, absolutely not. I don't even know her. Angela says, well, she did it to secure her spot. Phaedra says, I don't have to secure my spot. I have a guaranteed contract. And then Angela says, Porsha, why are you so willing to believe what she has to say after everything that's happened between y'all? You said I could have set this whole thing up. Why would you say that? And then Porsha's like, I said that because this whole thing just seems ridiculous with the June bug and all this stuff. And that was the end of the first part. Okay, let me address this. Angela, I liked Angela. I feel like a lot of y'all were giving her a little bit too much. Y'all were gassing her up a little bit too much. And I get it. I mean, she was a great housewife. But the way she had been moving towards the end of the season and post the season now that has aired, she rushed to Carlos King to get control of the narrative before the finale episode aired. This Marcus individual has now come out and said that Angela actually forced him to say it was Phaedra. There was another individual that I think he said he was at the event and he knows Marcus or some stuff like that, and he says that this was all orchestrated by Drew and Angela. Now Angela is coming to this reunion with non-receipts. You linking people together, yes, that could help you build a case, but you still got no evidence, Angela. You got no piece of screenshots, proof, timeline, evidence to prove that Phaedra was involved. You saying, oh, her brother know the aunt of the man or the cousin of the neighbor of this because they all went to Athens, Georgia, that makes no sense. Like, it doesn't solve the puzzle. And I think at this point that anyone who believes that Phaedra did this believes it because they're biased against Phaedra. And I get it. I get why people may not like Phaedra based on what she's done in the past. Has she lied? Yes. And I get that. But if you're willing to believe Phaedra did this with no evidence, you're biased because there is no evidence. There literally is none. And I also gotta say this. That little line of when Angela said there's only 2 high schools and 3 middle schools, I am a super fan of Housewives, as y'all know. That is a line from the season 3 reunion of The Real Housewives of Atlanta when Phaedra and Nene were going back and forth about, do you know me? I'm 43 to be exact. Yeah, that's what that is. So, Angela, you're giving fan behavior. You're trying to come for Phaedra. And by the way, can we just talk about, however you might feel about Phaedra, to say to Phaedra Parks, who was on an Emmy-winning show, season 2 of The Traitors, to say you're trying to secure a spot. Angela, baby, really? Would you just say that when Phaedra is like one of the faces of Bravo right now? That is ridiculous. But you guys, please let me know your thoughts about this reunion. I feel like some topics were talked about a little bit too much, like this whole things with the it's too much. I don't know why we still got 2 more parts, but we're gonna be right here talking about it. So y'all let me know what your thoughts were about this first part. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll catch y'all next time. Y'all have a great one. Bye.